Hi guys, Queen of Flannel here. Welcome back to the channel. So today I thought I would bring you guys a quick little how I color video. This has been something that has been on my docket of videos that I wanted to produce for quite some time, and today seemed like a good day. So we're going to underpaint with markers, and then I'm going to show you guys some tips and tricks for using your colored pencils over top of the markers. So first, words are hard, guys. Words are hard. Uh, First things first, let's talk about markers. So you have two different types of markers that you can use, and this technique will work with both. This is one of my Arteza Everblend alcohol markers and three of my Tombow water-based markers. And there are pros and cons to each type of marker. So with the alcohol marker, I guess you could kind of call this a con. Alcohol markers tend to be a little bit more expensive, although there are quite a few that have come on the market recently that are definitely more in a price bracket that I feel like is appropriate for adult coloring. The Artezas are actually not too expensive in the grand scheme of things. So for some people, cost might be a con. A couple pros with using alcohol markers for this technique is it's much easier to get a consistent wash of color. Basically, what I mean by that is minimal streaking. You can go back over this and the marker will continue to soak into the paper. Obviously, if you keep applying layers, it's going to give you a darker value, but if you're just doing single washes and you overlap your edges as you're coloring your image, it's going to be much less streaky than a water-based marker is, and way less to have to correct when we're actually working in our image. So that's a pro to using the alcohol markers. Unfortunately, though, for adult coloring purposes, most papers are not going to take alcohol markers without it bleeding through the back. So that limits you to the types of book and paper that you can use this on, unless of course you're willing to sacrifice the page on the back. So next we have our water-based markers. These are the Tombow ABT water-based markers. These are one of my favorite water-based markers that I have, and I have a couple. It does not need to be an expensive marker to do this. You can make it work with Crayola Super Tips. I've used those in a couple of my books. I have also used Arteza's Twi-marker water-based markers for this. Pros to using water-based markers is cost. They tend to be a little bit cheaper and easier to find, more accessible for a wider variety of people. One of the drawbacks to using water-based markers is, let me see if it'll do it, is the streakiness, and actually it kind of likes this paper, so. But I'm gonna try and make this look a little junky. So as you can see with the water-based marker, it does not blend into itself as I go back and forth over the marker. It'll dry, but you'll still be able to see a lot of these harsh edges. So you have to kind of be careful when you're coloring in your image that you're not going back and forth over top of your color. And I'll show you guys a trick for how we can kind of correct that. Unfortunately, it is it's the nature of water-based markers. It's going to happen. You're going to end up with streaks. You can do your best to minimize it, but it's just one of the occupational hazards of using a water-based marker. The other thing that you have to be careful of is if you keep scrubbing back and forth over your color in an attempt to try and get it to blend out, you run the risk of pilling your paper. This paper actually takes the water-based markers pretty well, so but I'll show you guys a couple tips and tricks once we get into the book here. But those are a few examples of the types of markers that we can use to color in our adult coloring books. So for the demo purposes of today, we're going to be working with the Tombows with the water-based markers, so I'm going to put the alcohol marker away. I'm going to slide this over here for right now. I'm going to show you guys a couple examples and kind of walk you through my process, and then we will talk about choosing your pencil colors to match your markers. I think this is the right book. Hopefully this is the right book. This is not the right book. Stand by, guys. Let me grab the correct book that has the images that I wanted to show you in it, and I will be right back. Okay, I am back. Sorry about that. So I have 2 copies of this book. I grabbed my tester copy to work in today because the image that I want to work on, I've actually partially colored in this book, but the image I wanted to show you guys as an example of what you can do using markers in your pencils is in my other copy. So a few of you guys have probably seen this. I've worked on it on stream before, or stream. I've worked on it on camera. There's a whip for this. It's also been up on my Instagram, and this was done with the Arteza Twi markers as the base color. So all of this center piece here on our dragon, all of this center on the orange, and the base yellow on his little, whatever you call this, on his face, and some of these little smoke clouds, and on his tail was all done with base marker, and then I used Faber-Castell Polychromos over top of it. Now, you can use a wax-based pencil with these. It's not my preference when doing this technique. I like the way the Polychromos behave over top of the markers. But this is just an example of what you can do using this technique. So some of you might be wondering, well, why would you bother going in with markers if you're just going to go in with pencils? So this technique I find is really good for detailed pages. I use it especially in my Kerby books. It helps me to feel like completing a page like this is more attainable. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by overly detailed pages, thinking, oh my god, how am I ever going to color this with colored pencils? It's going to take me forever, and it kind of off-puts people from coloring an image that maybe they have a really good idea for. It's just, if your primary medium is colored pencils, I can definitely see how this would feel intimidating. It's also good for if you have issues with your hands and your wrists. I know that for me, I bounce between mediums, and colored pencils after a while actually start to hurt my hands. So going in with this base marker layer, it's pretty quick. It speeds up some of the process. If I had done all of this in colored pencil, it would have taken me forever. I would still probably only be on a portion of this page. So I definitely find those are 2 benefits to using this technique. And especially in Kerby's books where he gives you a lot of these texture lines and areas for shading. I really like the texture that I get from going in with the pencils after the marker. So this was our example. So let's talk about choosing our colors. So I'm gonna bring back my scrap piece of paper and put my book out of the way for just a second and bring this back. So essentially when you're choosing your colors, the best advice that I can give is for your base color is to choose a light color. Essentially, this marker is going to be your highlight color. The same as if you were picking 3 colored pencils to use in a triad of colors. The marker basically is going to replace your lightest color. Now, that being said, when working with the alcohol-based markers, I like to find a color that matches a pencil that matches my marker as close as I can get it. And that will help correct out some of the streakiness. You can actually use that color to go over certain areas that maybe you missed some coverage with the marker, and I'll show you guys how I do that when we get into the image. So essentially, this would be me picking out four pencils. I'm just replacing one with a marker, and this is going to be my highlight color. It is possible as well to use darker colors with certain lighter colors over top of it. I'm going to show you guys a little example of that as well. I've got some greens picked out. It's harder to do, and I recommend that if you want to go this route, that you test it on a separate sheet of paper to make sure that your colors are going to work well together. I find that if you're going to go this route, it works better with greens using like a yellow over top of it. I've done it with some foliage and things like that in a couple of my books. But we are primarily going to work with our... Did I grab 2 of the same? No, I didn't. With our Polychromos and our Tombow. So I just picked a small section in Colormorphia that I thought we would be able to just, finish relatively quickly. And we're gonna work on this little fish guy up here in the corner. So let me bring you in just a bit. So we're gonna work on this little dude up here first. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in with my light color. And typically when I do this, I'm gonna color this whole thing in this base color. You can always go in with a white colored pencil later on and add some of your highlights back. If you choose to. That's typically not the way I work when I do this, but it is possible to go in with a white. So I am trying to be careful not to go back over top of my marker where I've already laid it down, but just for it's actually working pretty well with this. I'm gonna try and a little like streaky here. Of course it doesn't do it when I actually want it to streaky so that I can show you guys. I know this is probably not a goldfish, judging by its little whiskers, but we're coloring him orange because those are the colors that I picked up today. It's also helpful if you keep your marker strokes going in the same direction. So like I've missed this little spot right here. I'm just gonna leave it rather than attempt to go back over top of it. We're just gonna color our little fishy guy in. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to completely fill in the white space, because we can adjust for that when we go in with our pencils. This is basically just a quick way of getting some color down on the page. Be able to go in and add our texture and our detail with the colored pencil later on. Yeah, I chose this little guy because I thought it would be something that we would actually be able to finish. Not the entire image, obviously, but for the purposes of a little mini tutorial. Down here. But like I said, you do not need super expensive markers to do this with. I have seen beautiful images done with this technique with Crayola super tips. I've actually got one in one of my Airy books that I was working with the super tips on. Not my favorite, but if that's what you have, totally doable. And once you put the pencil down over top, okay. So, all right. I intentionally went in and kind of scrubbed back and forth at that just so I could kind of show you guys how we can kind of correct some of that. So before I start going in with my, my other colors, my darker colors, and it's not going to be perfect, but it does help. And so this is why I recommend that you find a color that's a close match to your marker color, is like your kind of your corrector color. So this is cadmium orange from the Polychromos. And I'm just gonna go into some of these areas where maybe I missed with the marker and was trying to avoid streaking it. And just use it to kind of fill in some of those little areas where I missed. And you don't need to be like super precise with this as you would if you were just using the colored pencils. We're not worried about blending it out. We are just simply worried about a little bit of extra coverage here and to just kind of correct out some skinniness. And the other nice thing about the markers as a base, they give your paper a really nice tooth for your pencils to grip onto once you start working over top of hard to get over there in that corner. And I could even see if I can get this to work. No, it's a little too dark. That's actually not too bad. I'm using the yellow and it's actually toning down a bit of the orange. I don't know how well that will show up on camera, but it's kind of, you know, it's toning it down a little bit. All right, so next I'm going to go in with this is my mid-tone. This is a dark cadmium orange. Sorry, I should have sharpened these before I started. So I think this is where people kind of, you get into colored pencil mode, and at this point it's like, well, okay, well, how do I blend the colored pencil out, you know, with the marker? And that's the thing is, we're not really blending the colored pencil out with anything but itself until we start adding in additional colors. So down here in this little area right here, we're gonna go a little darker. And then as we start coming out towards the edge of the little shade lines that Kerby has provided us, we're just gonna lighten up the pressure on the pencil and feather it out. And it basically blends itself out. So darker on this, on the little inside edge here. And then flick it out. And as we want to kind of blend it outwards, we're just going to lighten the pressure up and feather our marker out, or our pencil out. And we can go back in and darken this up. And just as we get to the areas where we want it a little lighter, lighten up the pressure. And it just kind of does its thing. And so we can go in here and add some dimension to our little scales. I'm not going to do all of these just for the sake of demoing here. A little bit in this corner where it's a little darker. Along these little lines Kerby gave us. And here I'm just going to use my pencil just basically to accentuate these lines. And a little bit up in the... And if you really want to blend out your edges of your pencil, you can go in carefully with a blender pencil just to smooth things out, or go back to your lightest color just use that. And then we can come in with, this is light cadmium red, and just in these corners here where it would be darker. And I could even, which I didn't pull any grays or browns for this one, but you could always go back in with a shadow color and just do the deep, like, little recesses in there, just like you would with the pencils. So I'm not gonna go all the way up his back, but, and I'm gonna use this color just kind of around his little face here, just to give him a little depth. And use my light color to blend it out. Let me just zoom you guys out just a little. There, we've got our little fishy. And we could really just, you know, we could take this as far as we wanted with it. Accentuate these lines, these little crevices. Yeah. All right, so let's come down here to our dragon, and I'm just gonna see if this will work. Let me just, okay, we're gonna use this color. So I'm just gonna do part of his wing just to show you guys how we can use a lighter color over a darker color, and hopefully this works. I didn't test this out with these specific colors before I did this. So if it doesn't work, my bad. I have done this with other colors with success, but I haven't done it with these colors. And I find when you start getting into like this mid-tone range with your colors, with your markers, is where the streakiness really starts to be apparent as you're coloring. You can kind of use it to your advantage. And give it, you know, just kind of treat it as a texture, like in terms of this little like dragon guy. I kind of like the mottled look. Okay, let's see what we can do with that. And I've got, I'm gonna try with, this is cadmium yellow. Yeah, I find yellows over top of certain greens add a nice look. And now I didn't pull any greens for this. So if I had, I would be looking for basically a toner green that would help me kind of balance out some of the areas where the marker was pretty streaky, but I actually kind of like the way the yellow looks over top of this, and then I would go in with, you know, my shadow colors in these deep, like, crevices and whatnot, and just add some depth and dimension to it. But yeah, so that is a couple examples of what we can do using our markers as a base with colored pencil. It definitely speeds up the process. It's way less work to complete this. If I was doing this with just the 3 pencils, I would still be working on the fish. If you guys have any questions, if you would like to see me do a bigger project with this technique, let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. I super appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified when I post additional content, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.